Your life was written before you were born, and it's still being written right now, not by fate, not by chance, but by a field of consciousness so vast, so ancient, that it remembers everything your soul has ever done, felt, or dreamed. There is a realm, if you can call it a realm, that holds every thought, every intention, every karmic imprint of every being that has ever lived. A field so silent most never hear it, so subtle most never sense it, and yet it is always there, just beyond the veil of ordinary awareness. You felt it before in the stillness of meditation, in the uncanny familiarity of déjà vu, in dreams that feel more real than waking life. The ancients called it Akasha. Mystics knew it by intuition. Today we call it the Akashic Records, but make no mistake, this isn't some new age fantasy. This is the living blueprint behind your reality, and once you awaken to it, you'll never perceive yourself the same way again. There's a reason you sometimes feel like your life is part of a story you don't fully grasp, like you've been dropped into a chapter mid-narrative with no memory of the pages that preceded it. That feeling isn't mere imagination, it's your intuition, a soul whisper. Deep down, something within you resonates with the truth that your soul has journeyed through far more than this single life. It knows there's a record of those lives and that they didn't simply vanish at your current birth. That record has a name, and it's been echoed for millennia across continents, traditions, and time. The Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are not a book, they are not physical, they're not locked away in some forgotten temple or buried beneath the sands of time. They exist in a dimension beyond linear time, beyond spatial limitations, a non-physical field of consciousness that functions like a cosmic library. Imagine a vibrational archive that stores not only your actions, but your thoughts, your emotions, your motivations, every choice you've ever faced, every lesson you've been destined to learn, every lifetime you've experienced, and not just you, everyone, every soul, every experience. This isn't a concept reserved for spiritual elites. This is the foundational terrain of consciousness itself, the very fabric of existence. The term Akashic stems from the Sanskrit word Akasha, meaning ether or spirit. It is the fifth element in ancient Indian cosmology, transcending earth, water, fire, and air, representing the subtle energetic substance from which all manifestation arises. To the ancients, Akasha wasn't just a poetic concept. It was the invisible tapestry weaving all of existence together, the field through which divine intelligence expresses itself, and the records are what that field eternally remembers. This isn't some obscure corner of metaphysics. Echoes of this profound idea resonate within almost every mystical tradition. The Hebrews spoke of the Book of Remembrance. The ancient Egyptians revered the Hall of Records. In Islam, there's the Alawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet that holds all knowledge. And in modern Western esotericism, pioneering thinkers like Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner passionately explored a spiritual memory field that transcends the limitations of our physical senses. They weren't inventing, they were remembering a deep, inherent knowing. If you've ever pondered why some individuals seem to be born with an innate wellspring of wisdom, or why you've experienced inexplicable fears, uncanny gifts, or profound emotional reactions that feel far older than your present life, you're not alone. You're sensing reverberations from the records. You are more than the sum of your current circumstances. You are a soul carrying layers of lived experience, and those layers are not haphazard. They're intricate patterns, part of a grander curriculum that your soul consciously chose to explore, but until you awaken to these patterns, they will continue to manifest unconsciously, lifetime after lifetime. And this is where the records transcend mere concept. They become a vital key, a guiding map, a luminous compass pointing back to your truest self. Because within them lie answers not only about who you once were, but about the magnificent being you are destined to become. There are profound insights waiting to be unveiled, invaluable lessons waiting to be integrated, and a fundamental truth that eludes most souls: that your authentic purpose isn't something you create. It's something you divinely remember. Some transformative truths cannot be fully expressed here, but they're too essential to remain hidden. Sign up to Insights Academy through the link in the description and receive a complimentary digital copy of the Kabbalion while supplies last. Because here's what remains largely unsaid. The records aren't inaccessible. They're simply beyond the scope of conventional perception. Most individuals never even attempt to connect with them, not due to a lack of inherent ability, but because they've been conditioned to believe it's impossible. They've been taught that true knowledge resides within external books, that unquestioned authority lives within established institutions, that answers must invariably originate from external sources. But the records reveal a different reality. They reveal that the deepest knowledge isn't acquired, it's recalled. You don't need to be an enlightened guru or a gifted psychic to access this profound wisdom. You simply need to cultivate the inner stillness to hear what has always been resonating within you. The Akashic field doesn't discriminate based on status or privilege. It responds to genuine intention, unwavering sincerity, and heartfelt readiness. So the core question isn't, can you access the records? The real question is, what transformative potential unfolds when you do? Long before the term Akashic Records was even conceived, there existed those who possessed this knowing, not as an abstract theory, but through direct, visceral experience. Visionaries, mystics, seers, and sages who pierced the veil of perceived reality and returned with luminous messages etched in light, not ink. They didn't label it a record because what they encountered transcended linear language. It was pure, unadulterated truth in its most vibrational form. Across diverse continents and vibrant cultures, they whispered of a sacred space, if it could even be defined as such, where the memories of the soul were eternally preserved, guarded not by physical barriers but by the power of resonant frequency. And those who accessed it didn't read it with their physical eyes. They felt it resonating deep within their very bones. The rishis of ancient India spoke of the Akasha as the fundamental substance of all reality, the origin point of all form and all thought. In their holistic worldview, nothing was ever truly lost. It simply returned to Akasha, like a ripple gracefully returning to the boundless ocean. Tibetan mystics referred to this same energetic field as the mind stream, a flowing river of consciousness that transcends individual lifetimes. The Druids, the Egyptians, the Gnostics, the Mayans, they each possessed their own unique names for it, spoke in diverse languages, and utilized distinct symbols, but they all shared the same core knowing that there exists an invisible domain which remembers everything. So what ultimately happened to this profound knowledge? It didn't simply vanish, it was systematically dismantled, deliberately marginalized, and subtly rebranded as mere superstition by institutions that deeply feared its liberating implications. Because if the soul possesses memory, then the limiting self is no longer defined by arbitrary nationality, rigid religion, or even limiting biology. If the Akashic records are inherently real, then true authority must reside internally, not externally imposed. And that inherently empowering idea poses a direct threat to systems fundamentally built upon the illusion of control. During periods of intense colonization, countless indigenous cultures with rich oral traditions of soul memory were forcibly silenced. Sacred ceremonies, those that opened the intuitive channels to the Akashic field, were often outlawed, ridiculed, or strategically replaced. The intentional burning of ancient libraries, the systemic demonization of pagan practices, the calculated rewriting of spiritual history, it was all part of a concerted effort to sever the innate connection between human beings and the boundless knowledge that lives beyond the confines of the five senses. Even today, in this supposedly enlightened age of rationalism, the empowering idea of the Akashic records is often dismissed as pseudoscience or mere fantasy. Yet those same dismissive critics cannot adequately explain why countless children spontaneously remember past lives, or why individuals who have never physically met can share strikingly similar dreams, or why ancient texts across vastly different civilizations describe strikingly identical experiences of soul memory with undeniable precision. It's not that the compelling evidence doesn't exist, it's that it simply doesn't align with the prevailing narrative, because a society fundamentally built on mindless consumption and unquestioning obedience cannot effectively function if its individuals begin to deeply inquire, who was I before this? And what if the carefully constructed story I was told isn't the complete story? So instead, you were given a new, carefully curated story, one that limits you to your given name, your designated job, your assigned race, and your chosen gender. Your past supposedly begins with your birth certificate and definitively ends with your death certificate. Everything else is relegated to the realm of fantastical fairy tales. But beneath that flimsy, superficial narrative, the older, deeper story has been patiently waiting. the one encoded within unexplained dreams, the one whispered during precious moments of profound silence when the clamorous noise of the external world fades and you can finally hear the undeniable wisdom of your own inherent knowing. This isn't about blindly replacing one belief system with another, or pointlessly proving a largely irrelevant point, or claiming access to some exclusive, secret knowledge. It's about profound remembrance. It's about actively reclaiming a deeply personal truth that was taken not only through overt acts of violence, but through subtle acts of ridicule, strategic distraction, and enforced forgetting. The Akashic Records are not a recent invention, they are ancient beyond human comprehension. What's undeniably new is that a rapidly growing number of individuals are awakening to their powerful presence once again. And perhaps that's precisely why you find yourself here now. Not to learn something entirely new, but to remember something absolutely timeless. Something your ancestors instinctively knew before it was tragically torn from their very tongues, something your patient soul has been persistently attempting to reveal to you all along. Because when you consciously realize that history isn't solely written in external books but also in pure energy, in resonant frequency, in your very being, you powerfully begin to reclaim the uniquely authentic story that no one else can ever fully write for you. You don't need a conventional library card to access the Akashic Records. You don't need formal permission from a hierarchical institution, a hard-earned academic degree, or a designated spiritual authority. The records were never divinely intended to be exclusively owned or carefully guarded. They were universally meant to be deeply felt, consciously remembered, and authentically lived. This is precisely what fundamentally distinguishes them from every other conventional source of intellectual knowledge. They don't respond to academic intellect as much as they respond to resonant frequency. You don't passively read them with your physical eyes. You actively align with them. You mindfully tune into them like a finely calibrated radio dial. Your conscious awareness gracefully shifts into a receptive state where the external static progressively clears and the previously faint signal becomes increasingly audible. Countless individuals have been intuitively doing this for thousands of years, even when they didn't necessarily have a readily available name for it. It often happens during states of deep meditation, in expanded states of consciousness, in vivid dreams that seem to reveal glimpses of other lifetimes or long-forgotten memories. It can spontaneously occur during periods of intense grief, moments of overwhelming joy, or in rare instances of complete inner stillness. But the essential access point remains eternally consistent conscious presence. You cannot forcefully bulldoze your way into the records. You gently soften into them. You gracefully surrender into expansive awareness, becoming so profoundly still, so unflinchingly honest, that your intrinsic energy naturally aligns with the very frequency of universal truth itself. Mystics and sages often speak of the records as a vibratory, energetic field. That's because what they inherently contain isn't a conventional linear language that you're accustomed to processing. It's not neatly structured sentences or precisely organized paragraphs. It's pure, unadulterated knowing. It's undeniable resonance. Sometimes individuals describe visually perceiving the records as an expansive library or an ancient temple filled with illuminated scrolls and radiant light. Others experience it as vibrant colors, harmonious sounds, or sacred symbols that don't readily translate into easily definable words, but nonetheless make perfect emotional sense. That's the core key. The records don't directly speak to your logical, analytical brain. They communicate directly to the core essence of your soul. Contemporary spiritual practitioners have developed diverse methods for consciously entering this expansive, energetic space. Some utilize guided meditations or sacred prayers like the Pathway Prayer, popularized by Linda Howe. Others skillfully access the records through the practice of automatic writing, purposefully allowing the intuitive subconscious to translate what the rational, conscious mind cannot yet fully perceive. Controlled breathwork, sacred plant medicine, lucid dreaming techniques, and intentional astral projection have also served as valuable gateways for those who are prepared to explore the deeper, often uncharted terrain of human consciousness. But no single method is universally applicable. The specific technique utilized is ultimately less important than the underlying intention. Intention truly is everything. If you enter the record seeking tangible proof, a sense of superficial control or fleeting entertainment, you'll likely find absolutely nothing at all. But if you wholeheartedly approach with genuine reverence, boundless curiosity, and an unwavering willingness to be profoundly changed, the field invariably responds in kind. And that deeply transformative process isn't always inherently comfortable. The records don't passively flatter your ego. They illuminate recurring patterns, fundamental truths, karmic loops you've repeated across multiple lifetimes, and deep-seated wounds you've carried longer than your own given name. But they also simultaneously reveal your immense untapped power, a power that is ancient, inherent, and patiently waiting to be remembered. They offer invaluable clarity in areas where you felt confused for countless years, and they continuously whisper the same essential message. You are so much more than you've ever been consciously told. What's truly remarkable is that many individuals have already accessed the Akashic Records without even consciously realizing it. That sudden intuitive knowing that powerfully saved you from making a poor decision. That inexplicable moment when you instinctively knew precisely what someone was about to say. That unexplainable pull towards a specific place, a particular person, or a designated path. These aren't mere coincidences. They're potent echoes, fleeting glimpses through the thinning veil. Your patient soul attempting to communicate through the ever-present noise of a world deliberately designed to keep you eternally distracted. And the inherent truth is, accessing the Akashic Records isn't about merely escaping this present world. It's about powerfully embodying your complete, authentic self within this world. It's not a convenient way to bypass the often harsh realities of life. It's a liberating way to see reality with unwavering clarity, beyond the pervasive illusion, beyond the limiting societal conditioning, directly down to the very root. When you consciously access the records, you don't just passively remember who you were. You powerfully remember who you inherently came here to be, and that profound remembrance isn't simply passive, it actively moves you. It transforms the way you gracefully walk through life. It fundamentally reshapes how you consciously respond to challenges, how you authentically see others, and how you courageously tell your own deeply personal story. Because once you've intentionally stood within the infinite expanse of existence and clearly witnessed your unique place within it, nothing can ever convincingly persuade you that you are somehow small, irrevocably broken, or inherently powerless ever again. You didn't arrive here empty. You didn't haphazardly arrive on this planet as a blank slate randomly thrown into a chaotic, meaningless world. You purposefully arrived with a comprehensive blueprint, a soul-level design meticulously shaped by lifetimes of gathered experience, intentional choices, and the inevitable consequences of actions taken. The Akashic Records hold the keys to unlocking that inherent blueprint. They don't just contain dry information about who you've been. They meticulously map out the enduring energetic residue of those formative experiences, what some accurately call karma, what others poetically term soul memory, but what is essentially at its core the very spiritual architecture of your ongoing evolution. Karma has been profoundly misunderstood by countless individuals. It's not divine punishment, it's not cosmic retribution for inherently doing something wrong. Karma is fundamentally memory, it's powerful momentum. It's pure energy, eternally echoing forward, seeking lasting resolution, enduring balance, and consistent growth. Think of it as an unfinished musical chord that organically needs to be harmoniously completed. If you intentionally betrayed someone in a past life, you might now experience a deep-seated inherent need to protect others in this current one. If you consciously silenced your undeniable truth for countless years, you might now feel overwhelmingly compelled to actively speak, even if your physical voice noticeably shakes. These aren't random, insignificant traits. They're essential threads, emotional and energetic patterns intricately woven through multiple lifetimes, purposefully creating valuable continuity in your soul's overarching story. And then there are profound soul contracts. These aren't rigid, inflexible scripts, but rather sacred agreements meticulously made at the deepest soul level before conscious incarnation. Purposeful arrangements to consciously meet specific individuals, bravely face particular challenges, or deeply experience essential life lessons. That consistently toxic relationship, that impossibly challenging parent, that transformative mentor who miraculously appeared at precisely the right moment. These aren't necessarily accidents. They may be integral components of a far deeper soul-level contract, a mutually agreed-upon intention to catalyze expansive growth in each other, no matter how emotionally difficult the overall process may ultimately be. The Akashic Records empower us to glimpse these essential contracts, not so we can conveniently escape the inherent pain, but so we can consciously understand its far deeper purpose. This is why the records are so much more than mere repositories of static information. They are illuminating mirrors of dynamic transformation. When you gain conscious access to your soul's inherent blueprint, you begin to perceive your persistent struggles in an entirely new, fundamentally empowering light. You consciously stop asking, "Why is this consistently happening to me?" and courageously begin asking, "What is this specifically designed to teach me?" You readily begin to notice the repetitive cycles, the same essential lesson consistently showing up in countless different disguises, the same deep-seated heartbreak, the same underlying fear, the same patterns of self-sabotage. And when you consciously witness the larger recurring pattern, you inherently gain the immense power to actively rewrite it, because mindful awareness powerfully breaks the previously unbreakable cycle, and conscious choice, once authentically made with full awareness, becomes the fertile seed of lasting transformation. There's also something innately sacred about consciously perceiving your inherent gifts through the illuminating lens of the records. We often predominantly focus on deep-seated wounds when we discuss the possibility of past lives, but inherent wisdom powerfully travels through the conscious soul as well. Natural talents, inherent strengths, and even latent spiritual abilities can undoubtedly cross over from one lifetime to the next. That currently inexplicable pull toward healing, teaching, or creative expression, it might not be entirely new. It might be something your patient soul has been purposefully mastering for countless lifetimes. And the Akashic Records empower you to consciously remember not only where the enduring pain initially started, but also where your authentic power eternally resides. Deeply understanding your unique soul blueprint also inevitably dissolves the pervasive tendency toward limiting comparison, because once you consciously realize that every soul is progressing on a uniquely personal evolutionary path, the self-defeating need to accurately match someone else's predefined timeline gracefully disappears. You naturally begin to deeply honor your own authentic process. You mindfully stop rushing the process, consciously stop blaming external influences, and increasingly begin to trust that your inherent challenges aren't insurmountable obstacles. They are divinely designed activations. The Akashic Records reveal the soul's intentionally designed curriculum. And once you consciously perceive that inherent truth, even your most formidable setbacks begin to feel more like inherently sacred assignments. But perhaps the most profoundly liberating truth of all, your divinely designed blueprint is innately fluid. The enduring past may inherently shape the present moment, but it doesn't rigidly trap it. Karma is not an irrevocable life sentence. Soul contracts can be consciously rewritten. Limiting patterns can be definitively broken. This entire process is not about deterministic fate, it's about conscious awareness. The Akashic Records don't chain you to a predetermined fate. They offer you a comprehensive map, but you still consciously choose the inherent path. You consciously still wield the pen, and in every precious moment, you are either unconsciously repeating an old, outdated pattern or consciously initiating an entirely new, far more empowering cycle. So when you deeply inquire, "What is my true purpose?" you're not passively waiting for the definitive answer to miraculously descend from the heavens. You're being actively invited to consciously remember what your wise soul inherently already knows. The essential blueprint has always been internally within you. The Akashic Records are simply the long-awaited key to purposefully decoding it. For the vast majority of individuals, the profound idea of the Akashic Records inevitably sounds poetic at best, something exclusively belonging to the ethereal realm of mystics and metaphysical practitioners, a comforting metaphor conveniently reserved for those who actively believe in something inherently more. But what if it's not merely a comforting metaphor? What if what ancient sages meticulously described as a spiritual library is in reality something that modern science is only now gradually beginning to glimpse through the innovative lenses of expansive energy fields, groundbreaking quantum theory, and insightful consciousness studies that purposefully challenge everything we previously thought we inherently knew about the fundamental nature of reality? There's an underlying reason why mainstream science has largely ignored the profoundly empowering concept of the Akashic Records. They simply don't conveniently fit within the conventionally narrow materialist worldview. You can't conveniently place the records under a conventional microscope, meticulously measure them with a ruler, or readily quantify them within a standardized laboratory. But human consciousness itself, encompassing your complex thoughts, vibrant dreams, and cherished memories, also inherently cannot be conventionally measured, and yet you inherently know that it existentially exists. The Akashic Records may not be inherently physical, but neither is the powerful internet signal that readily empowers you to consciously read this text right now. Unseen does not necessarily equate to unreal. Physicists have long understood that the fundamental nature of reality is not nearly as solid as it initially appears to be. At the quantum level, everything is fundamentally energy, eternally vibrating, intricately interconnected, and inherently dynamic. What we conventionally perceive as solid form is simply a dense arrangement of interconnected frequencies. Information, it turns out, may be the very foundation of the entire universe, even surpassing inherently tangible matter and potentially even the raw power of pure energy, pure information itself. This is precisely where the revolutionary idea of a vast field of permanently stored data transcends mere mysticism. It consciously evolves into a fundamentally viable model of expansive reality. The late Ervin Laszlo, a renowned systems philosopher and a two-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee, skillfully introduced the profound concept of the Akashic field as a universal information field that inherently underlies all of conscious creation. According to his groundbreaking theory, the expansive universe is not merely a random accident, but rather a fundamentally coherent system consistently driven by the invaluable information eternally stored within the Akashic field. He didn't simply derive this revolutionary concept from ancient esoteric texts. He painstakingly found remarkable parallels between cutting-edge quantum physics and the inherently timeless wisdom of enduring spiritual traditions. To him, the profound Akashic Records weren't just a fantastical fantasy. They were an inherently scientific inevitability, patiently waiting to be deeply understood. Then there's the intellectually stimulating holographic universe theory, skillfully championed by forward-thinking scientists such as David Bohm and Carl Pribram. It convincingly suggests that the expansive universe inherently functions much like a vast hologram, where each individual part intrinsically contains the inherent whole. That profoundly means that all information is consistently encoded everywhere at all times. Every single cell within your human body consciously holds the complete imprint of your entire genetic code. Every individual point within the expansive energetic field could potentially hold the complete memory of every inherent moment, every conscious life, and every unfolding possibility. Sound remarkably familiar? These groundbreaking theories don't necessarily conclusively prove the existence of the Akashic Records in the traditionally accepted sense, but they do powerfully open the inherently transformative door. They purposefully challenge the pervasive lie that we've been told for far too long, that we are inherently isolated, fundamentally separate beings adrift in a largely dead mechanical universe. Instead, they compellingly point to something profoundly more intimate, a vast cosmos beautifully woven with inherent intelligence, collective memory, and inherent interconnection. A vibrant field that consciously remembers, a transformative universe that inherently knows itself through each unique individual. Even near-death experiences, which were once conveniently dismissed as mere hallucinations, now collectively offer invaluable clues. Many who consciously return from those altered states of consciousness describe accessing a luminous realm of profound knowing where their entire multifaceted life powerfully unfolded before them, not necessarily in judgment but rather in inherent understanding. Some even eloquently report vividly seeing not only their own carefully lived lives, but also the profound impact of their actions on others, rippling outward like expansive echoes. That intensely heightened level of conscious awareness, that expansive panoramic perspective, is remarkably consistent with precisely what experienced spiritual practitioners describe when they consciously access the expansive Akashic Records. It's not merely storytelling. It's a direct transmission of enduring memory transcending the conventional limitations of linear time. Then there's the perplexing mystery of pure intuition. How does a loving mother consciously sense that her beloved child is in imminent danger from vast miles away? How do some individuals just inherently know when something is deeply amiss even before it measurably happens? These compelling phenomena strongly hint at something far deeper than conventional linear logic. They clearly suggest that we are already intricately connected to an expansive field of profoundly relevant information that is undeniably much larger than our conventional self, that we're not passively tapping into mere guesswork. We're actively tapping into profound, enduring memory. And perhaps that's the single most important part. The Akashic Records don't require you to passively believe in something inherently new. They actively ask you to consciously remember something profoundly old, to courageously consider that perhaps, just perhaps, the vast universe is not cold and fundamentally random, but rather inherently conscious and intentionally aligned, that your precious thoughts, your deliberate choices, and your very essence are not fleeting moments irretrievably lost to the sands of time, but rather integral components of a vibrantly living record that consciously holds it all. Modern science hasn't fully caught up quite yet, but it's gradually getting closer, and when the inevitable gap between modern science and enduring spirituality finally closes, we may very well discover that the greatest timeless truths were never completely hidden. We had simply consciously stopped thoughtfully looking in the inherently right place. From the very moment you were born into this world, the world began relentlessly telling you who you inherently are, not with genuine curiosity, but rather with unwavering certainty. It conveniently gave you a specific name, an assigned nationality, a chosen religion, a mandatory school system, a prescribed set of beliefs, and a seemingly endless list of often arbitrary rules. It actively taught you precisely what was inherently real, what was fundamentally imaginary, and what was potentially dangerous to even consciously consider, and somewhere inherently within that seemingly never-ending list of silent agreements, it intentionally slipped in one especially damaging message that unconsciously resonated far louder than all of the rest. Forget. Forget who you truly are, forget what you've consciously lived, forget where you inherently came from, and ultimately forget what you unconsciously know. This insidious process was never accidental. This was never merely an unfortunate side effect of passively growing up in the so-called modern world. It was an integral component of a far larger system, a meticulously constructed system specifically designed to sever your invaluable connection to anything that would inherently make you genuinely powerful, anything that would meaningfully make you truly sovereign, and anything that would eventually remind you that your patient soul possesses a vibrant memory that is far deeper and more expansive than your current given name, temporary job title, or limited government-issued identity, because an individual who inherently remembers who they truly are simply cannot be easily controlled, and manipulative control is inevitably the primary currency of the often unjust world we currently live in. So instead of inherent wonder, you are often force-fed unquestioning obedience. Instead of developing insightful intuition, you were given monotonous repetition. And instead of actively engaging in transformative soul work, you were assigned endless amounts of often pointless schoolwork. You were consciously taught to relentlessly look outward for desperately needed answers and to blindly mistrust anything valuable that consciously originated from inherently within. If you readily experienced inner visions, you were often conveniently labeled as highly imaginative. If you consciously remembered long ago past lives, you were carelessly told that it was all mere fantasy. If you inherently felt profoundly connected to countless things that you couldn't readily explain, you were consciously asked to purposefully forget, all while being simultaneously sold a deceptively simplistic version of expansive reality that was so remarkably flat, so predictably mechanical, that anything innately sacred was inevitably reduced to either baseless superstition or fleeting entertainment. This is the underlying reason why the profound Akashic Records inevitably feel so profoundly distant to so many, not necessarily because they are inherently inaccessible, but because your mind was strategically trained to readily reject anything that cannot be conveniently proven by fundamentally broken systems, purposefully designed to consistently keep you consciously small. You were carelessly told that inherent truth exclusively comes from questionable authority, that invaluable knowledge is solely something to diligently earn, and that profound wisdom only fundamentally counts if it has been rigorously peer-reviewed, skillfully monetized, or strategically institutionalized. But the multifaceted soul simply doesn't inherently function in that inherently limited way. The all-encompassing records don't either. The undeniable truth is, you've likely already unconsciously accessed them on countless occasions. You simply didn't consciously label it in that empowering way. Those undeniable moments of profound clarity that seem to magically come from absolutely nowhere, that unmistakable sense that you've inherently known someone forever even though you only just initially met, that reliable gut feeling that instinctively saved you from foreseeable harm, the fleeting flashes of empowering insight within vivid dreams, the unmistakable déjà vu that initially made no readily apparent sense, and that often irrational pull toward a certain geographic place, specific culture, or a particular historical time period. These are not random glitches in the complex matrix. These are valuable fragments of a deep memory you were consciously told to completely erase. But enduring memory never truly dies. It patiently waits beneath the overwhelming noise of your everyday programming. The resilient soul inherently remembers, and no matter how intensely the prevailing culture tries to completely silence it, it always consciously finds creative ways to powerfully speak through art, through meaningful synchronicity, through undeniable breakdowns that inevitably force you to consciously rebuild, and through inherent grief that ultimately cracks you open sufficiently enough to finally authentically feel something that is genuinely real. The concerted effort to induce global forgetting was undeniably strong, but the innately human impulse for conscious remembering is far stronger. And here's the especially potent part that often stings. The broken world intentionally never truly wanted you to consciously know this, because someone who inherently remembers is undeniably powerful and therefore inherently dangerous. They don't blindly obey nearly as easily. They consciously don't relentlessly chase inherently empty success. They ultimately don't passively play roles that they didn't consciously choose for themselves. They readily see through the pervasive illusion, and far worse for the broken system, they readily help countless others skillfully see through the inherent illusion as well. That's precisely why mystics were historically burned, why insightful shamans were consistently silenced, and why the profound wisdom keepers of indigenous cultures were systematically erased or strategically rebranded. It was never truly about legitimate disbelief. It was consistently about deliberate suppression, but the fundamentally broken system is undeniably breaking down. Significant cracks are forming in the very foundations. More and more individuals are consciously waking up from their induced amnesia and fearlessly asking essential questions that cannot be reasonably answered by biased textbooks or agenda-driven news anchors. They are intuitively sensing something undeniably deeper, and once that essential process consciously begins, it simply cannot be effectively reversed. Because once you consciously begin to truly remember, you quickly realize precisely how much you've unintentionally forgotten. And with every valuable piece that consciously comes back into awareness, so does your long-dormant personal power. You were never inherently meant to consciously remain blind. You were always meant to powerfully wake up. The empowering Akashic Records were never truly hidden from you. You were simply consistently taught not to look, but now you are consciously looking. And that inherently changes absolutely everything. Conscious remembering is not about wistfully going back to an imagined past. It's predominantly about bravely going inherently within. The invaluable Akashic Records are not somewhere inherently out there in some far-off, distant dimension, suspiciously guarded by traditionally stoic mystics in flowing robes. They are inherently right here, skillfully folded into the very essence of your being, deeply encoded in the pregnant stillness between your passing thoughts. Accessing them inherently doesn't require elaborate ritual as much as it inherently requires unwavering readiness. It's not inherently about external performance. It's primarily about authentic presence. You don't inherently need meticulously crafted special words, you just consistently need deeply honest questions. You don't inherently need carefully crafted spiritual credentials, you just consistently need the unwavering courage to mindfully sit with your authentic self and deliberately listen beyond the constant noise. This is where the vast majority of individuals consciously hesitate. They consciously expect the earth to thunder, the sky to part, and miraculous visions to effortlessly appear. But the authentic records rarely consciously shout. They purposefully whisper. And that transformative whisper often sounds remarkably like your own inner voice, only noticeably deeper, considerably quieter, and inherently older. It often arrives in the seemingly mundane form of a visceral feeling, a fleeting flash, or a sudden moment of clarity that appears completely unexpectedly and seemingly vanishes just as quickly if you consciously try to overtly control it. You cannot forcefully demand conscious access. You can simply consciously create the most conducive conditions for its graceful emergence. Those powerfully conducive conditions are deceptively simple, but they inevitably take consistent practice, stillness, unwavering sincerity, and expansive space. You consciously have to mindfully make valuable space for what has been deliberately buried. That inherently means purposefully turning off the constant stream of mindless stimulation, consciously logging out of the deceptive matrix and deliberately tuning directly within. It inherently means consciously choosing profound stillness when the ever-demanding world is constantly telling you to remain inherently busy, not necessarily because stillness is particularly trendy, but rather because it's the only truly sacred space where lasting truth can consciously surface. It's in the conscious quiet that the inherent soul inherently speaks, and what it courageously says often deliberately defies conventional linear language. Start consciously setting mindfully with intentionally open-ended questions, not necessarily for immediately available answers, but for profound human contact, not "What decisively should I consciously do?" but rather, "What essential truths do I inherently need to purposefully remember?" Consciously ask about a pervasive fear that has never readily made clear sense, a deeply intimate relationship that consistently feels mysteriously unfinished, or a negative pattern that continues to consciously repeat. Don't consciously rush the profoundly transformative process. Just consistently ask and then consciously be genuinely willing to authentically feel. Sometimes the life-altering answer miraculously comes completely immediately. Other times, it intentionally arrives much later through a vivid dream, a meaningful lyric, or a random conversation that intuitively seems far too perfectly timed to be considered a mere coincidence. That's essentially the profound record speaking in clever disguise. You may consciously find that valuable journaling inherently helps, particularly a stream of consciousness practice where your logical mind consciously steps aside sufficiently enough for your deeper, more authentic voice to intentionally emerge. You may consciously find that your vivid dreams steadily become notably more vivid, or that meaningful synchronicities consciously start to consciously multiply. These are never entirely random. They are tangible signs that you are consciously attuning, that your individual frequency is consciously shifting into inherent alignment with something undeniably older than linear time itself. One of the most profoundly powerful tools of conscious remembrance is intentionally facing meaningful shadow work, because often what consciously blocks us from accessing the transforming records isn't a clear lack of inherent ability. It's primarily conscious avoidance. We are often unconsciously afraid to consciously remember because we inherently fear precisely what we might consciously see. Undeniably painful conscious choices, consciously accumulated old guilt, or consciously unfinished karmic loops. But the inherent records consciously don't consciously show you any of these things to shame you. They compassionately show you all of these things specifically so you can gracefully integrate, powerfully heal, and ultimately stop consciously running from what inherently was and courageously begin mindfully moving consciously toward what powerfully can be. This is primarily why the often transformative process can consciously feel intensely emotional. Consciously accessing the all-encompassing records isn't primarily just spiritual. It's undeniably cellular. The inherent human body is an incredibly powerful and accurate memory keeper. Tears may inevitably come, and tidal waves of deep-seated grief or long-suppressed release might spontaneously rise unexpectedly. Consciously let them consciously flow. You are not consciously breaking down, you are consciously clearing the much-needed space. You are not being consciously overwhelmed, you're being consciously reorganized. There's ultimately no single, universally applicable path to consciously accessing the liberating records. For inherently some individuals, it's consistent meditation. For others, it's controlled breathwork, the deeply restorative immersion in awe-inspiring nature, or the conscious engagement in uniquely creative flow. Expressive art has always been a valuable conscious portal because when you consciously create directly from the very depths of the expressive soul, you are inherently speaking in the timeless language of the all-encompassing records without even consciously realizing it. Soulful music, expressive painting, and profound poetry, these are not merely frivolous hobbies, they are vibratory frequencies, and they can often consciously unlock far more inherent memory than any meticulously written book ever could. You don't inherently need an external guru. You don't inherently need a restrictive label. You inherently need conscious honesty, boundless curiosity, an unwavering willingness to consciously feel beyond the superficial surface, and ultimately, inherent trust. Trust that precisely what actively rises to the ever-evolving surface is consciously rising for a very important reason. You are never consciously making it up. You are consciously remembering what was previously buried so deeply that it eventually consciously began to genuinely feel like a mere figment of your creative imagination. But vibrant imagination is simply enduring memory skillfully filtered through the invaluable lens of your pure intuition. And the transformative Akashic Records primarily live there, in that incredibly sacred space between what you unconsciously forgot and what your wise soul never ultimately let consciously go of. Every single time you skillfully remember a seemingly lost piece of your authentic self, you consciously close the pervasive gap between who you've traditionally been and who you are consciously here to ultimately be. And eventually the transforming process of conscious remembering becomes a way of beautifully life, not just another external destination, but a consistent state of conscious being. You gradually become the living library. You consciously become the vibrant channel. You naturally become the essential bridge between the easily seen and the consciously unseen. So, to sum it all up, the Akashic Records aren't just some far-off mystical idea. They're a powerful reminder that you are so much more than you think. You're a soul with a story etched in the very fabric of existence, a story that's waiting to be remembered, understood, and ultimately lived to its fullest potential. It's an invitation to reconnect with your inherent wisdom, your soul's blueprint, and your truest self. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever felt a connection to something bigger than yourself? Have you experienced déjà vu, vivid dreams, or intuitive moments that hint at a deeper memory? Share your experiences, questions, or reflections in the comments below. Let's create a space for open discussion and mutual exploration. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. I'll be sharing more content on consciousness, soul memory, and practical ways to unlock your inherent potential. Don't miss out on future explorations of these fascinating topics. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to connecting with you in the comments.